Welcome to Medical Marijuana and Wellness. Today's topic is medical marijuana and routes of administration. And my guest speaker today is Amy Green from MMTC of Florida. Amy, tell us a little bit about the components of medical cannabis, because I think it's important when we look at routes of administration to try to get the most out of the product.
Yeah, absolutely. It's important to know that cannabis is made up of more than one compound. Specifically, it's made up of cannabinoids, terpenes, and flavonoids. So cannabinoids are going to be the products that are the compounds that we're normally associating with cannabis. So that's going to be THC, CBD, and then lots and lots of minor cannabinoids. Terpenes are going to be what give cannabis its smell and its taste. And then flavonoids are going to be also contributing to smell and taste for cannabis, and just adding a lot of really beneficial properties as well, anti-inflammatory, neuroprotective, and they can also be antioxidant as well.
Sure, that's great. Now, the question is, these all work together, and what we're really trying to create is something called the entourage effect, where working together, all these components working together kind of increase the efficacy of cannabis itself. So when we talk about routes of administration, people kind of say, what is a route of administration? Maybe you can answer that for us, because I think there's some, we're really looking at different ways that people use the product to be able to get the most out of it.
Yes, certainly. And these are probably things that a lot of people are not familiar with. They didn't exist 15 to 20 years ago for a lot of these methods. So a route of administration is going to be any way that the product is used in or on the body. So you could have an oral product, a sublingual under the tongue product. You could have something topical on the skin. You could have inhalation where it's being drawn into the lungs. There's many, many different routes of administration.
Yeah, and each of those targets a specific area. I mean, I tend to look at routes of administration as having four major categories, and that's how cannabis is ingested into the body. Sublingual, where you put it under your tongue, where the blood vessels actually absorb it into your system. Oral, which goes into the stomach. Topical, which gets into the blood vessels, and then, of course, inhalation, which is a number that it works. And each of these routes of administration have a different onset and a different duration time. And onset means how long it takes to work. Is that correct?
That's correct. I usually tell people you'll have two different times. So it's the time that you first feel the effects from the product, and then you have a time that you have the full effects of the product. So onset is just when you start feeling it, but full effects may take a little bit longer.
Great. And then the duration, is how long it actually works in the skin. And we're going to talk about that as we go through the different types of products. In fact, let's just do that and make it real easy so we understand it. Now, some linguals also can be called tinctures or oils. And what we're looking at here is the method is to take the dropper and put it under your tongue and or swish it around your mouth. This is a fairly effective way of using cannabis, and I think it's a pretty good starter method. You see a lot of that, don't you?
Absolutely. The product is very easy to measure. You can count drops from the eyedropper, or you can use the measurements that are on the eyedropper. Obviously, sublingual means under the tongue. I really always recommend that people just grab a spoon and measure onto the spoon and then put the oil into your mouth. It's just going to make your life easier. Sublingual products are extremely easy to use. They're extremely easy to adjust your dose, and they're available in lots and lots of varieties to meet specific needs.
Right. And that's why a lot of people start with sublinguals as a way to go. And when you look at sublingual drops, you'll hear of something called a ratio. You'll see like 1-to-1 or 8-to-1 or something like that. What you're really talking about is how much CBD does the product have versus how much THC it has. And then I think the other thing about sublinguals, which you might want to comment on, is you can start at a very low dose. You can start at, like, for example, the first line on the eyedropper, 0.25 milliliters, but you can then increase that. The nice part about using sublinguals, which I find, is you can also increase the amount of CBD, which a lot of people do to be able to get maximum effect, especially if they're working on conditions like anxiety and inflammation.
Yes, certainly. One of the greatest things about sublingual drops is that there are so many ratio products available, and you'll find them in every single ratio that you could imagine. So if you need something that has a higher CBD ratio, you can find that on the market. If you need something that has a higher THC ratio, also available.
Right. And we might mention it takes somewhere between 15 to 40 minutes for it to take effect, which again, it depends on your body. In my particular case, it takes about 25 minutes. And usually it'll last between 4 to 6 hours. In my particular case, it lasts about 5 hours. So you just need to use it, try it, and figure out what's best for you. But this is a very effective way, especially in the morning, to really get started. Let's talk about sprays, because this is, again, a very beginner-friendly type of route of administration. Let's talk about how it absorbs into the mouth. I think it's very much like sublingual, but it's also something that's very personal.
It is. So you can use sprays in many different ways. The most common products that you'll find are nasal sprays, oral sprays, or metered dose inhalers that look a lot like an albuterol inhaler. All of these products are usually going to be low dose or micro dose, which is a very low dose. So it's a really easy way to start using products that are going to work pretty quickly, and just really measure in your dose that works specifically for you.
And again, it's usually 15 to 20 minutes to work and 4 to 6 hours of working, but it's really great for microdosing because you can take a little bit during the day, let's say every hour or every 2 hours, rather than taking one big full dose right up front and then letting it work out. So it's a great microdosing technique. Now let's talk about capsules, because capsules is very interesting. And this is where really you have a method that is pre-portioned dosing. And you have a good comment about that.
I do. So I generally don't recommend capsules to brand new patients that have never used any cannabis products before. And that's just because you can't change the dose at all. And they'd usually be too strong in the beginning. So I always recommend that if a patient is using another product that is an equivalent dose, say, for example, they are using a 10 milligram gummy, and there is a company that sells a 10 milligram capsule. Yeah, absolutely give the capsule a consideration because you're using the equivalent dose. But at least in the beginning, it's not necessarily the best idea for newer patients. And that's just because you don't have the ability to change the dose at all.
Mm-hmm. Right. And usually they take a longer onset. Usually it'll take 1 to 2 hours to work, which is to be very careful. Although once they start working, they work very effectively for 4 to 10 hours.
Yeah, absolutely. And just with that long onset, you just have to be careful that you're not taking another medication, and you just have to be patient.
Well, we always have a saying, about the time you think it's not working is about the time you take another one.
Exactly.
So I always say with products like this, it's kind of like, be cool. That's the best thing to do. That has to do with edibles, because edibles are the same way. You really got to pay attention. I say be very, very careful of edibles, because again, they have that 15 to 40 minutes of effect, but they may even take longer. Sometimes they may take like 2 hours to work. And that's where you have to be very, very careful. Although they work a long time. They work 4 to 10 hours. Again, much like the capsules. What's interesting is, for example, in the evening, I'm a chocoholic. I'll take some chocolate just before bed, a little square chocolate, because it helps me sleep through the night. I get that, that 8 hours of coverage. Where if I take a tincture drop or something else, I'll get 2 or 3 or maybe 4 hours, and I'll wake up in the middle of the night.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and edibles are very easy to dose. They come in just about every variety that you can think of. So you're definitely going to find a product that you like, but that's also effective for you.
Right. So it's something to really pay attention. But again, key with edibles especially is go low and go slow. And that's really hard to do because, first of all, you want to get that effect from cannabis, but it may take 30 minutes to an hour to work, which tests your patience. And to be blunt, some of these products taste pretty good. You really want to get like a chocolate bar, you really want to grab another one.
Absolutely. I always recommend, if you do pick up a medicated chocolate bar, just stop by a gas station or grocery store, pick up a non-medicated chocolate bar to fill that chocolate craving if you do have a chocolate craving after eating your medicated dose.
Right. And you can make your own edibles. That a lot of people do, but I would recommend that you use a calculator for that. Sherry Cannabis has a really good calculator. We'll put this in the notes, and you'll be able to use that to be able to figure out how much cannabis you should be using. Now let's talk about topicals. These are lotions, gels and creams. These are very effective, and we see a lot of this use. In fact, nice thing about topicals is they work almost immediately.
Absolutely, and they are effective. So it's not just fast relief, but it's effective relief. Topicals come in ratios, just like a lot of other products. Sometimes that combination of CBD and THC topically really does the job for some people.
Yeah. And it lasts for 1 to 2 hours. I know that I have herniated discs in my neck, and I use topicals all the time, and they're just great for that. And also, part of being a topical is a transdermal patch. It doesn't just go on the skin; it goes right into the blood. It goes right into your bloodstream.
Yeah, so I describe these as a low continuous dose for anywhere from 8 to 72 hours that will go into your bloodstream. So you just want to make sure that the low continuous dose that it's giving you is one that you're comfortable with.
Yeah, and some people have, and some of the dispensaries have patches that'll last for 8 hours. Some will last up to 72 hours, which I think is great.
Absolutely, and it just gives you that variety to pick that product that works just for you and works well for you.
Sure. So let's get to some of the fun parts of this. Inhalation. This is where we talk about vape pens, metered dose inhalers, but people can actually use pens, use inhalation devices, which the reason you do that is because they work almost immediately. Although they work for 1 to 3 hours, they really get rid of that pain like right now. This is something that is very popular.
They are extremely popular, and it is because they work so quickly. Within 3 to 5 minutes, you know the full effects of the dose that you took. So it's really helpful for helping you get over those humps if you have a spike in pain during the day, anxiety, anything else that's going on. Just that small, quick dose can help get you back where you need to be.
Now, when you do this, what's key is, you take it, you inhale for 1 to 2 seconds, blow out slowly. I've also found that after you do that, just take another breath. It kind of helps you just get that inhalation into your lungs and makes it effective. And you'll feel it work within 5 minutes.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I've never had a vape that took longer than 5 minutes. A standard dose with a vape is a 3-second inhale. For brand new patients, I really always recommend a half-second or 1 second inhale. Wait 5 to 10 minutes to see how you feel with that dose. And then if you need more, take another half-second or 1 second inhale. And again, it's going up in those small steps to find that spot where you're really comfortable.
Right. And the thing that's really important, we've heard a lot of, vape methods, inhalation got a lot of bad press, but as long as you're buying from a state licensed dispensary and from a quality distributor, you won't have a problem. A lot of the problems came from offshore brands into outlets that were really not regulated, and that created a lot of problems. And I think a lot of that have been solved, but buy from a licensed dispensary to be safe.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, the question then becomes, when you're inhaling, we're going to talk about terpenes, but each terpene has a different, let's just say, temperature setting that for optimal use. And I think a lot of people don't understand this, that there's a low and a medium and high heat that can really bring out the best of the terpenes and, candidly, the best of the cannabinoids.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about low heat. You're going to get a really wide variety of terpenes. A lot of them, they vaporize at lower temperatures. When you start moving up in temperatures, you're going to get a more intense effects from the THC, but you'll be getting less of the terpenes and flavonoids as you go up in temperature. So low heat is really great for getting a full dose of terpenes and getting a dose of THC. High heat, really good for strong psychoactive effects.
Right. And terpenes are really what you're looking for, because that's really where you get a lot of the medical benefits from cannabis. So let's start with dry flower. It can be called bud, joints, smokables. What I find really amazing is I have friends of mine who say, well, what do I need medical cannabis for? I'll just go smoke a joint. Well, it's interesting that when you take that joint and you put that 500-degree temperature up to the joint, you burn off 50% of the cannabinoids, most of the terpenes, and most of the flavonoids. You're significantly reducing the medical efficacy of that particular product. That's the bad news. Good news is it works.
It does work. you will have better efficacy with other ways of using dry flower though. Below, you put down vaporizers. So there are products called dry herb vapes, and they are an extremely effective way to use dry flower. And they have multiple temperature settings, multiple ways that you can use them. It's just really great to be able to choose your temperatures and the effects that work for you.
Yeah, I know that it's very effective. At least for me, I found it very effective. I use a Mighty Plus, and I find it to be very, very effective. I set it at 360 degrees, and I get the terpene range that I'm looking for much better than smoking a joint.
Yeah, I agree. And once you find that temperature that works for you with a dry herb vape, most people tend to stick there because it works so well.
Right. And here's some of the products on the market. Typically in dispensaries here in Florida, you'll see a Peak or a Pax 3, and then online you can pick up the Mighties, the Gias, and the Volcanoes and that type of thing. Let's talk about raw cannabis for a second, because one of the questions that I get quite a bit is, can I cook with it and can I eat it raw? And the answer is, yeah, it's actually really good for you. Vitamin C, vitamin K, a lot of the vitamins that you're looking for. Raw cannabis isn't going to hurt you. In fact, if anything, it acts as a fiber to help your digestive system.
Absolutely. It's just, I mean, it's packed full of great nutrients, and it's not going to hurt you at all. It won't really give you a high if you eat it. And that's because the THC is in the acidic form. And so it's not going to give those same psychoactive effects.
Right. In other words, you have to get cannabis over 300 degrees to be able to trigger THC and CBD. Before that, it's THCA and CBDA. So if you use it, if you're able to ingest cannabis at a lower temperature, either eat it raw in plants or in food, and or in a oil that you make that maybe is mainly cooked at maybe 180 degrees, you'll get the benefits of the inflammation the help with pain, and a lot of the cannabinoids and flavonoids without that THC high that a lot of people worry about.
Yeah, so it can be just a great way to get those benefits that you're looking for, but without having to smoke anything.
Yeah, that's kind of one of the secret tips about using medical cannabis. There are what they call homemade edibles. People make their own. There's something called deboxylation, and deboxylation is where you heat the cannabis to really bring out the THC. And again, what we mentioned is you may want to deboxylate it, no, you may not. I think that's an option that you have.
It is. So if you don't decarboxylate your medical marijuana, you'll end up putting THCA, the non-psychoactive form of THC, into your edible. If you do decarboxylate it, you end up with THC, the psychoactive part. So it just depends on if you decarboxylate or if you don't, and what you prefer.
Right. And as I mentioned, you can go to CannabisSherry.com to get a calculator to help you figure out what to use. I have to tell you, I make my own tincture oil, but I make it it's cooked at about 180 degrees for 8 hours. And what it does, it gives me the THCA, the CBDA, gives me all the terpenes and all the flavonoids without getting high. And I use that in the mornings because it helps me get rid of my pain and helps me control the inflammation that I have. Very, very effective. So let's talk about concentrates, because when we talk about, what's the options to smoking, you hear about all kinds of things. You hear about hash, shatter, crumble, wax, rosin, resins. So let's talk a little bit about those. Really, when you take the whole plant, and the whole plant is cannabis, terpenes, and flavonoids, what we really want to do is be able to take as much of those as we can to get the maximum medical benefits. And really, there's 3 different kinds over here. Tell us a little bit about the full spectrums and the isolates, and of course, the way they introduce terpenes back into the products.
Sure. So it's just going to be different methods of processing the cannabis plant to come out with these different end products. So the first thing is just going to be your live rosins, your hash, your live resins. These are products that are minimally processed, and they have strong effects that are going to last a while. Then you'll have other concentrates that just apply either usually CO2 or ethanol
Yeah,
to
ethanol.
break
Yeah.
down the cannabis plants. And they're doing the same thing. They're extracting the THC. Some of them add back terpenes, some of them don't, and it just depends on the company or the producer. Um, I mean, you have a lot of different products.
There's a lot of different options. So let's kind of run through them. One of my favorites is rosin, where they
Yeah,
actually
so
take the flower and press it between two hot plates.
yeah, you end up with a beautiful colored, um, not very sticky product, but the effects are very strong and very quick. It is just the trichomes from the very outside tip of the leaf. It's what makes flower look kind of shiny sometimes.
Yeah.
uh, and it just takes off all of those trichomes and it just puts them into a beautiful, almost wax-like texture that you can use several different ways. Either, a dab rig or a electronic dab rig.
Yeah, or a vape pen or something like that. I have
Or
a
a
vape
vape
pen
pen,
with rosin.
correct.
Now, what's fascinating is, again, with products like rosins, you maintain most of the terpenes and most of the flavonoids, which is great. Same thing with hash. We hear about hash. We don't see a lot of it on the market, but really what it is it's really cannabis that's rubbed through a series of screens to separate the trichomes from the plant material.
And that's it. I mean, it really is that simple. We don't necessarily see it that much in our market. You will see some ice water hash, which is down at the bottom, but generally not traditional hash.
Right, right. And that's a very good product. Then you hear about the full spectrum products where they take the whole product itself and make it into an oil. RSO, Rick Simpson oil, is an example of that.
Yeah, these products include all of the cannabinoids, terpenes, flavonoids that were in the original product, just condensed down. It's like they took the entire plant, just took out all of the fibrous plant material, and you're just left with everything beneficial.
Yeah, it's very, very good. Now, I do want to caution folks, RSO, because it is it's a full plant product, whole plant product, is very strong. I call it the 151 Bacardi of the cannabis world. So when you're looking at RSO, go low and go slow, because it really has some strong effects. It's a very good product.
It is a very good product, but again, very strong.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why it works so effective on things, for example, like pain management, also for cancer. Resin is another one of my favorites. The flash freezing, again, maintaining all the terpenes and all the flavonoids.
Yep, you're just left with a beautiful product that has a lot of flavor, and you can use it a couple different ways.
Yeah. So, I mean, rosin and resin are a couple of my favorites when it comes to vape pens. There's also distillates, which is sometimes they feature up to 98% of the cannabinoids, which is great. But what they do when they do that is they get rid of almost all the terpenes.
Yeah, and you might find a distillate that has some terpenes added back, but it's not going to be the terpenes that were from that specific flower.
Yeah. And isolates are pretty much the same way. Again, you're going to have a lot of cannabinoids, but not many of the terpenes. Without the terpenes and flavonoids, although cannabinoids are helpful, with the terpenes and the flavonoids, you get a lot more, let's just say, medical value than you would without it.
Yeah, the most common isolate that you'll find is THCA, which is just uncarboxylated THC. A lot of people add it on top of a bowl of flour or into a joint, or use it in another smoking method to greatly increase the THC level from that flour.
Right. Now, the other is, we talk about the methods of extraction. Butane is one way that they use it. It gives you a high percentage of cannabinoids, but it does preserve some of the terpenes. But this is one way of making what they call the shatters, the waxes, and the bladders. Or butters, excuse me. And this is kind of a different forms of, one's a glassy form, one's an opaque form, and the other is actually like a whipped form.
Yeah, and truly with any of these products, it's just finding the product consistency that you like working with.
Yeah, that's really out there. And we had mentioned earlier, the same thing is there's a number of different ways, like CO2 and also ethanol as extraction methods. And again, they also produce the shatters, the butters, the waxes, and things like that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's just a production method. Now, when you look at concentrates, there's also pens that you can use. These are some of my favorites. I'm a huge fan of the Hypno Zero over here. It not only works with vaporizers, it also works with concentrates as well, which is just great. And here's some, the packs, Lunars. Lunar is again one of my favorites. Same thing with the dippers. You'll find in the stores, a lot of dispensaries have, for example, the Puffco products that are really popular. And then, of course, you talked about dabbing. There's also some dabbing rigs that are out here as well. Dabbing, why don't you explain dabbing for a minute?
Sure. So dabbing is the process of using either a product like a dab pen or a dab rig. That's usually going to be it looks like a very small bong. And then you'll have what it's called the banger at the end. That's where you put your product into. You heat it up with either electricity or with a torch. Or if you're using something like the little dipper, that is going to heat up the white part at the top, and you put your mouth over the other end and you just inhale. With
mouth down here,
yep,
mouth to the bottom. Yep.
Yep.
Be careful.
But anyway, you're going to add the whatever concentrate you want to either the compartment that it goes in for a pen, or it's going into your banger, and then you're going to inhale that product through your tiny little bong or through your pen. And they work very quickly. It's going to be just as quick as using a vaporizer.
Yeah, and I should point out that each of these pens give you the capability of doing a temperature setting. They either have 3 or 4 temperature settings, which go back to matching that low, medium, and high that we talked about with the terpene slide before. So, in summary, let's talk about cannabis and routes of administration. Key is start low and go slow.
Every time. It doesn't matter what route you're using. I always recommend starting low and going slow. Even if you feel that you're a more experienced cannabis user, if you are trying a new route, you still want to take a very conservative approach when you're first starting, because you're not always sure how that route is going to feel for you.
Right. And also, choose a route of administration that's comfortable for you. Some people don't like inhalation. Some people do. Some people like topicals. Some people don't. Really get something that's comfortable that you'll use. Don't pick up a product that you're not going to use. And remember to cover the entire day. If you take it in the morning, like in my case, I have herniated discs in my neck and I have inflammation in my neck and pain. I have it all day long. If I take something in the morning, in the late afternoon, it wears off. I have to take it constantly during the day in order to be able to get the coverage that I need. And I do want to point out, you can look at what they call the certificate of analysis to figure out what terpenes are in the product, which really help us be able to lead to that entourage effect that we're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I personally, I use a 1-to-1 during the day, and that's because I don't want any psychoactive effects while I'm trying to go about my day.
Right. Exactly. So let me just summarize. There's a lot of different routes of administration. We're not going to just drive down the slide. We kind of took them. This is being given to you so that at the end of this presentation, you can get a copy of the presentation and you get a copy of the slide, and you'll be able to use it as a reference guide for the different products that are out there, and something that could really help quite a bit. So, Amy, with this, we're going to end our webinar. Any comments you want to make?
Just go low, go slow. Don't be intimidated by new products that you perhaps haven't tried before. All you can do is just try it. And if it doesn't work for you, that's okay. Not everything works for everybody. It's just going to take trial and error to find that specific product that works well for you.
Right. And again, everybody is different, as we know from people like with alcohol or with caffeine. Some people can drink a little bit and, it affects them. Some people can drink a lot and they're not affected at all. Take your time, understand what your tolerance level is. But again, use a route of administration that you're comfortable with, that you will use, and it'll cover your day. So thank you very much for watching this video. And if you have any questions, please email us. We look forward to hearing from you. Thank you.